Next on the agenda is our update from the Coast Guard today. Good afternoon, my name is Mark Churchwell. I am the ACME liaison to the CCME board. It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker today is Mr. David L. Walts. He has served for the last 11 years as Deputy Chief of the United States Coast Guard's Force Readiness Command's Training Division. As the Deputy Chief, he has either acted as or directly supervised the Coast Guard's Voluntary Education Service Chief. He has had centralized execution responsibility for Coast Guard formal training through the 24-unit, 3,000-person training system. During his Coast Guard career, he held various positions in information and communications management and served aboard 4 Coast Guard cutters. Mr. Walts' last position before retirement from active duty was as the Human Resource Manager for the Assistant Commandant for Command, Control, Communications, Computers, and Information Technology. Mr. Walts is a graduate of the Coast Guard Academy and holds a master's degree from Webster University and the Naval Postgraduate School. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Walts today.
Thank you. I don't think I want to give that speech. Good afternoon. I'm glad that I don't have the 4:45 slot. If I would have had the 4:45 slot, I might not have shown up either. So, you heard my bio. When my wife picked up the agenda yesterday in the hotel room and read it, she said, "You wrote this, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I kind of had to." And she said, "It's kind of blah, and you don't toot your own horn enough." But that's kind of what I've been throughout my life, is self-deprecating. What I am is a Coast Guardsman. I'm a retired Coast Guardsman and an 11-and-a-half-year GS employee of the United States Coast Guard. This is our flag. We're one of the 5 military services. Just in case you didn't know that, because some people don't. If this were a more formal setting with formal flags up here, there would be a lot of battle streamers on that. Probably not as much as the Marine Corps, but we have been in our share of naval battles and even some ashore. President Obama was very surprised when he went to Afghanistan and asked for a show of hands for the services, and there were Coast Guardsmen in the room. So that's kind of what I am. What I am not is my high school football career lasted 1 week. I was too small and too slow to do anything, have any impact on the field, so I figured that out, that academics is probably where I should go. So that differs from Dan a lot. I've never written a country song, nor can I carry any of the 12 notes in a bucket. The Coast Guard's voluntary education program. We're a small service. We do things a little differently than any of the other services, but we rely significantly on our partnerships with Dante's, SOC, ACE, and DOD. And we get a lot of services, some of them for free, some of them we have to pay for, but we usually kind of go with our hat in hand as the poor boy and usually get a cut rate on whatever we ask for. So if I can figure out, Okay, my presentation is bookended by some quotes from 2 pretty famous Harvard graduates. This is the first. President Kennedy was very dynamic and felt a lot that education was very important in our society. So I'm a member of Force Readiness Command in the Coast Guard. It's a relatively new command, about 4 years old. When we reorganized the Coast Guard, we're responsible for the individual readiness of all of our members in the Coast Guard, whether it be civilian, active duty, or the selected reserve. What I might want to tell you at this point is our organization manages training and education. So the dollars that we get into our budget there's a competition of sorts, of which I'm the nexus of where decisions are made for the expenditure of funds on either training or education. And as you all know in the room, those are very different activities. Our training division, this is a little bit repetitive from the last slide, so I'll move on. How do we do our business? We develop policy. We provide supervision to the training and education system in the Coast Guard, and that's a fairly extensive system. Force Readiness Command is about a little over 3,000 members, both at our training centers and the full-time people that work directly for us. 2,900 of them are in the training division, one way or another, either at the training centers or on our staff. We've got 8 major commands, 8 smaller units, and one of those is the Coast Guard Institute. And I have out in the audience, I hope, if not, they're going to be on report, some of the Institute's staff. Would they stand up, please? The commander is the CO, and Tex Collier's out there too, I think. I can't see the audience. There he is. And Sue Riley's out there as well. And Lieutenant Marsh is also the XO out there. Now, also in the audience, I've got probably about 25, 26, 27 ESOs, Educational Services Officers. Could you stand up, please? For the Coast Guard, obviously. Now stay standing, stay standing. You get to stretch your legs for a little bit. These are the people with the boots on the ground, or to put it in a more nautical format, on the deck plates. They're the people at the deck plates that are dealing with the individuals who are getting the services, getting the educational services, taking the CLEP test, sitting in your classes out there. And these are my heroes, because these are the ones that get to do the everyday job that I wish I could do. I'd be rather doing that job than be a bureaucrat in a staff somewhere. We've got people here from all the way in the northern stretches in Kodiak, Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Providence, Rhode Island, all the way down through the Heartland, through St. Louis and Cleveland, down to south in Miami, San Juan, and to the west we have people in Honolulu, San Diego, just down the street, Long Beach, Petaluma. Now, I didn't hit all of the locations, but I wanted to hit a representative group and across the geography of the United States. We have about 49 total full-time ESOs. Now, the ESOs can please sit down now. They coordinate the activities of over 600 collateral duty ESOs. Now, we have no multiple ESO divisions anywhere generally. They're all independent duty at their particular commands. None of them work for my staff. None of them work for the Coast Guard Institute staff. So we have a unique situation. We have a matrix organization that we manage without direct supervision of any of them. And it works pretty well. And it works because of the dedication of the people that I just had stand up. Oh, and one other person I forgot is my right-hand person, Mr. Dave Padley, who's my program manager. Dave, are you out there? Yeah, there he is. Okay. He's my program manager in DC. So they work for the commands, they work for the COs. Did I lose? Oh, there it is. Oh, here we go. So this is a map of the United States with all of the training system outlined in there, and the different training centers I talked about. Everything from boarding officer to boot camp to pilot training to aviation crew training. All of those kind of what people call, in the other services, call MOSs, we call ratings. All that gets done here, except for the one right there in the middle in the heartland. That's the Institute, the coordination center, if you will, or the execution center that deals with the ESOs and gives them the tools that they need to execute their job. And at this point, I need to point out, too, that we have a very good relationship with NCMES down in Pensacola. The Navy, I don't know what the acronym is right off the top of my head, but it's the Navy Management Information System that pays tuition assistance. So we have a deal with them where we contract with them, and they pay all of our tuition assistance. So the nuts and bolts of paying the bills gets done by NCMES, coordinated through the Institute. I have Education Professional Development Branch in DC, of which Mr. Padley is a member of, and they take care of these elements of the education part of the program, including the voluntary education. Tuition assistance is one of the major drivers in our Coast Guard voluntary education program. We seek to lower or zero out, if possible, our members' out-of-pocket expenses and to continue their education. Right now, the Coast Guard is in a very, very good situation in terms of the quality of people that are coming into the Coast Guard. It was just about a year or so ago that our recruiting command gave us the news that our recruits have the highest AFQT coming into the Coast Guard of any of the services. That we just passed up the Air Force, and we were pretty proud of that because they've been there for a long time at the top. They also are coming in with a certain amount of education, and most of them are looking to advance it farther. So what are the requirements to get tuition assistance in the Coast Guard? I think there's a theme that you'll see here with this slide. The eligibility requirements are pretty low for the enlisted. All they have to do is complete the course before they release from active duty or discharge or retirement. That's not very difficult to attain for the enlisted workforce. For officers, however, we require them to be in the service 24 months after they complete their education. And I can't tell you how many 06s I've told who are about a year from retirement that figured out they need some more education that no, they're not eligible. Civilians need, we wait for them to be in the government for 3 months before we allow it, and then we have a payback associated with 1 month for every credit there. Reserves, they have to be a drilling reservist. Okay, this is pretty familiar to most all of you. We have the same caps that DoD has. We advocated in 2003 to move to the DoD caps, and be consistent with that across the board. And we're going to try to maintain that as we can through the budget crises that we're probably going to see in the future. But there are also pressures on DoD as well. Now it comes a point in time where if I were in the classroom, I would knock on the podium or hit the blackboard or something and say, for the educators out there, this is where you probably need to start paying attention. This is where and how our money gets spent, and you can probably glean some important information out of this. You can see over time since 2003, I mentioned that we went to equity with DoD in 2003. That's shortly before that, everybody went up to 4,500. So you can see that it was a big increase from 2003 to 2004 and kept on a pretty good slope right up until about 2010. We've seen a little bit of a flattening, a plateau, if you will. Some of that in 2011, 2012 was probably due what you may have heard about the Deepwater Horizon incident. We had lots of people who were assigned to Deepwater Horizon down there in the Gulf, and that probably kept them from using a little bit of tuition assistance during that period. So we're at about $20 million. I heard the staff sergeant this morning say that the Air Force is like $194 million. So we're spending about 10% of what the Air Force spends. Our per capita may be up there with the Air Force, but we're spending a lot less. And any kind of budget pressure on us is equivalent to the same kind of thing that the Air Force sees and the other services see for theirs. Okay, these are the top 25 schools that our Coast Guard members seek tuition assistance funding for. I had the staff put them in alphabetical order. I didn't want to show any precedence, any favoritism here or anything like that. But I think many of you sitting in the seats probably are affiliated with these colleges and universities. This is 2012 numbers. Now, what's the demographic of the people who use TA in the Coast Guard? This was pretty similar to what I heard from the Air Force this morning. 82% enlisted, 13% officers, and 5% civilians. Now, that civilians to the DoD people is a little bit different because I think we're the only ones that have a consistent program across all of our workforce, including civilians. It's the same caps as for the active duty military and the CELRES. So a pretty significant number are enlisted members. Okay, distance learning versus in the classroom. Similar to what the Air Force showed you this morning, it's highly on the side of online nowadays. You can give whatever reasons, whether it's a new generation or whatever, or whether because it's easier to do it and easier to establish an affiliation with a university. But that's what we're seeing with our tuition assistance situation. Okay, what levels are we seeing? Mostly undergraduate. That's like about 75% of our TA is in the undergraduate area, and another 1,100 or so in the graduate area. So significantly. So what we've heard is predominantly enlisted, predominantly undergraduate. And again, this is the funding associated with those. So this is by dollars, and the last one was by individuals. So a lot of money going to undergraduate not so much going to graduate. And this is, I believe by the numbers, this is just our active duty. Probably our active duty and our civilian. Oh, it says reserve there as well. Okay, I'm mistaken there. So okay. Well, anybody familiar with HR in the services knows that there are pyramids, usually for ratings or MOSs, that kind of thing. And the pyramid kind of bulges out at the E5, E6 level, E4, E5, E6. So that's where most of our enlisted are, and that's not surprisingly where most of our TA funding goes, is to those E4s, E5s, and E6s. As opposed to our officers and our cell res, about 1 out of every 3 enlisted members are involved in the TA program at one time or another. So those people who probably came into the Coast Guard to get some kind of a benefit for that, either through that or the GI Bill or both, are utilizing this at a pretty high rate. It's much less than that for officers, like 10%, I think, for officers. And not surprisingly, most of the enlisted are going for undergraduate degrees. And again, our emphasis is minimizing the out-of-pocket expenses for our enlisted personnel. Okay, another way to move ahead in the world is to have a transcript situation. Transcripts are a great way to minimize out-of-pocket expense for our members, and oh, by the way, out of our program's pocket expenses too. So it lowers their tuition assistance expenditures, and the official Coast Guard transcripts are sent directly to the college by the Institute's registrar's office. So the registrar's office, Sue Riley, is back there, and she's in charge of the registrar's office, and that we're very much working toward the joint transcript as well, but that's still a little bit in the future for us. The number of transcripts processed has really expanded. As we automated it back a few years ago, we started to expand it, and we've kind of plateaued out there. We're doing about 8,000 a year of transcripts, and we will do it for anyone with a Coast Guard affiliation. We'll do it for people who got out. We'll do it for people who have retired. We'll do it for civilians currently working with the Coast Guard. We'll do it for active duty and cell res, of course. Now, so how do we minimize, we talked about the transcripts, how do we minimize our people's out-of-pocket expenses and out-of-program pocket expenses? At the cost of $250 per semester hour, the potential cost of avoidance of per member per transcript process is about $6,000, where they get credit for military training or experiential, like those kind of things. That's the savings to the individual, but more directly to the program not having to fund the tuition assistance. Sock Coast is also another way we've done that. We've been involved with Sock Coast about, I think about 7 years now, as I recall, or maybe a little bit more. But getting those Sock Coast agreements in place and getting a Coast Guard transcript that's accepted by the university or college is the way we're going to go if we can. Another way that we are working right now toward, and it's a relatively new thing. We started at Training Center Petaluma, where we have some technical ratings, ET and the electronics technician and the information technology technician and the operational specialist. So what this is it focuses on a rating, and then we focus with a number of colleges and universities that might have a degree that's in that line. For instance, with ET, we're working with DeVry. We also have one in law enforcement that we're working with a couple schools on. So what it does is it gets the people while they're in A school at their first MOS training, their apprenticeship training, and gives them an idea. We can actually project out a transcript of what they would achieve as they move through the ratings up through from E4 up through E9, and what they would achieve from their transcript. And then it tells them where their gaps are, and then the school that has the degree will tell them what they can take to do that. So we call this our Pathways program. They're roadmaps to integrate the credit earned and via the rating service and service schools, and it will give them a brief description of the degree program, show how the credits are earned, and outline the degree requirements. So this is the wave of the future for us, we think. It's a little bit of and we'll probably get a Sock Coast agreement out of that as well. So it's a combination of a lot of things. It's a combination of the Dante's CLEP, the combination of Sock Coast, and then focus on a rating and get them at one of their earliest points in the Coast Guard so that we get them thinking about that. The Air Force is very good about being proactive, and sometimes I've heard almost draconian about emphasizing to their junior people, you got to get an education. We're maybe a little bit more not to the left of that on the spectrum of that proactivity, but we're trying to give them guidance early on that would help them. Another area where we have been working to minimize the cost, the out-of-pocket cost, if they have other expenses associated with their education, whether it be books that are not paid for in the program, or lab fees, or something like that, we work with the Coast Guard Foundation, which is a not-for-profit foundation supporting Coast Guard people. And $750 grant available to active duty. We had a $1,100 grant, $1,100 awarded in 12, and $344,000 issued. So that's another way of minimizing our out-of-pocket expenses as we can. It's not the full boat in a lot of cases, but it's coming close to it. Okay, and this is a little bit of the ratings where the foundation grants went to. Again, the people who are doing it most, E5, E6, E4s, are getting the most of the money, and which is what we would want to see happen. So, educational initiatives and issues. We're very concerned about the sustainability of tuition assistance funding. Everybody looks at the internet and sees the evening news and knows that the federal government's under a lot of pressure for spending money. Transitioning to the joint transcript is a priority that we have. And then continuing our work with Dante's and DOD and ACE concerning creation of standard operating procedures for military evaluations of courses. And then what's our way ahead? tight budgets, emphasis on ACE, SOC-COAST, rating-specific degree programs, our Pathways program, and efficient use of scarce resources really demands a focus on those with the greatest need. I think you saw that when I talked about the middle of those enlisted pyramid, where the people that are getting the most bang, and hopefully for us the most ROI. That concludes my remarks. I'm not sure that I have very much time left. Do I? No. Okay. I would be willing to take questions, but they said I can't. Thank you very much for this opportunity. If there's one takeaway, the Coast Guard is the 5th military service. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph.
Mr. Walts, we thank you very much for being here. A couple of things before you break. We have the ESO panel following the break. Break is in the exhibit hall. I strongly recommend you be here for the ESO panel, and your colleagues that aren't here, if you could go find them and make sure they are also here for the ESO panel. It took a lot of effort for the services to have representatives here today, and I think our respect and the reason we're here, we should all be in this room after the break. It's a power break. I think there's all kinds of energy motivating food that will fuel you, and continue to think how fueled you'll be, because we'll be ending early today and you have that beautiful sunshine. Just don't try to get into it too early. Please return from break. I would also like to acknowledge, and I'll do this again tomorrow since so many people are here, but the program, I think you all agree it's a beautiful program, and Brandman's marketing department designed that program, and I just want to give them a round of applause. I think it's gorgeous. Okay, we'll see you soon.